the rhythm, catching every beat. Together we embrace the futures at our feet. The futures at our feet.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. I'm not entirely sure what number we're on. Actually, that's a lie. I do know it. This will be episode 295 of the Edufuturists podcast, which is pretty cool. We're creeping up to that 300 mark. We are massively excited to be joined by a guest in the studio. If you're watching this, you'll see them. If you're just listening and you're waiting for the intrigue, this person will introduce himself very, very soon. But Steve, good to be back in the studio with you, my friend. A few weeks' time, and we'll be in the Edufuturist Uprising in Manchester, won't we?
Absolutely, yeah. 3 weeks tomorrow. Heavy. I've seen the
As
planning.
we're recording, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're heavy in the planning, but I think we're pretty much there. We seem like we're organised, Ben. I don't know what's happened here. So when did this become a well-organised, well-oiled machine?
Who are you? What have you done with Ben and Steve? Is what I was thinking after that last meeting we had earlier this morning. But yeah, we're getting there. It's good. It's good fun. We've had some great conversations recently. Obviously, if you didn't get a chance to listen to our interview with the CEO of ISTE, Richard Kalata, that was an incredible episode. You can go back and have a listen to that. And we've got some cool ones coming up as well. So that is great. But none more cool than today's guest, who was the 2020 Futurist of the Year. She's proudly holding her award there, if you are watching on screen. The wonderful, our friend for many years, but our friend who is doing wonderful things up in Scotland and beyond. It's Louise Jones. Louise, thank you for joining us again on the podcast.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. 5 years. Unbelievable. 5 years have passed since then. So much has happened. But yeah, I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, so it is wonderful. We know that this is not your first rodeo on the Edufuturist podcast. We've had a few good conversations, and obviously you spoke at our first ever summit as well in Oswaldtwistle, the land of the free, the home of the whatever else it is in Oswaldtwistle, where I'm from. And you were at that first Edufuturist summit and spoke there. And things have changed since then. Maybe tell us a little bit about what you're doing currently, Louise, and then we can have some exciting conversations about what you're thinking about in terms of future education.
Thanks. So for the last 5 years, I've actually been in the same place in that I've been working with ThingLink, and I'm now working for them 3 days. But over those 5 years, I mean, the product has just kind of grown, massively. And my role's changed within them as well. I remember when I came on the first Edufuturist podcast, I had a title which was Social Impact and Community. And I think you both took the mick out of me and said, did you make that title up? Because I don't think there could be a more suitable title for Louise Jones than that. And the answer was, yeah, I did make it up. So now I'm Chief Community Officer, but I really focus on developing the community of trainers and anyone who wants to use ThingLink, good use cases, adoption, and our webinar series as well. And I'm doing that 3 days a week. And the other 2 days a week, I get to develop my own projects, which some of them are just passion projects, which is lovely, really nice.
Yeah, I remember the first starting point, I think, was it 2019? Just trying to think when it was. I was trying to think back to when we started using ThingLink. We'd just done the rebuild so we'd taken the big space at Lumen Education Group where I was, I'd taken on the library team, so it's definitely post 2018. I want to say 2019 potentially. And we'd moved some big spaces, reinvamp them in terms of teaching learning spaces, and then move some of the library spaces. And we had an opportunity to, when you go into library systems and spaces, and there's like end, and it's like, this is sport, and it's 1.670 or something, like a Dewey Decimal fact-finding thing. We were like, let's do it completely different. And I remember looking at ThingLink and going, how can we make it a bit more augmented? How can we make sure it's a bit more in terms of engaging with the learners? And we started to allow learners, before they got access to the library, locate where they would be, how would they find it, how would they access it, and how would they explore to get the content. And yeah, I just remember it being it really stood out, even in that time of what was the art of the possible. Even just that simple bit of not reinventing the wheel, just that, at the low level, substituting what was already there in terms of just a flat resource to really something that kind of engaged and spirited away, because it was one of those things, and I'm sure it's not unique to just education, but libraries often aren't the best signposted, and learners want to get in and get out and get some of that information, and to be able to kind of find and navigate them through a timeline, even in just there, was just so simple, I think, and that's why we kind of started into it. And then I know that you've been doing lots of different work and all of that kind of thing, but I think it's the bit that found my passion was the bit that you imparted your passion in terms of immersive onto me and everybody else, in terms of why do you feel it's so you're passionate about it, and how do you feel that you stepped into that, and I suppose how has that evolved in terms of your love for it, but also the product itself and what's to come, I guess.
So I think my passion has always been around kind of multi-modalities, and the technical term, of course, for that is dual coding. But it's about having the same information in multiple ways. And I wrote a blog post about this and shared it on LinkedIn in earlier in the week. And I saw my friend's son the other day, and he's only 7, and he has his mum's phone, and she was listening to Amazon Music, and it was playing out on the house speakers. And Nico, who's 7, had the lyrics on his mum's phone whilst the song was playing. And he was reading the lyrics and taking it all in. And he put the phone down, and it was the second time that he'd heard this song. And he knew the lyrics pitch perfect. He was reading, he was singing. So no one told him to go and learn this piece of text. No one told him to practice his oracy. But he just got it because there was an emotional connection to it. He was reading, he was hearing, he was practicing complex concepts for a 7-year-old. And I just love that. And it reminded me about how we learn, and forgetting about learning styles, which are so old hat and have been dispelled, but are often quite useful for people. But I just love multimodalities and trying to find ways which create the best conditions for young people to learn. And that stems out of my own experience of being in school and absolutely hating it. I was the first year that did GCSEs, which really shows how old I am. But the point of it was GCSEs were always meant to be about kind of coursework and being, kind of having more ways to express yourselves with projects. But I didn't find that, but I was just fascinated by how we can make learning conditions more engaging for young people. And that's what drove me. So multimodalities, I think, really went hand in hand with accessibility and inclusion. So if you've got multi-modalities, and you've got video, and you've got text, and you've got sounds, and you've got accessibility tools in there as well, you're making it inclusive for everybody. So I think that's where it really hit home for me. And as you know, I've really been interested in accessibility and inclusion my whole career, having done that with Google for Education. So I think that's what kind of drew me to it. And I thought there wasn't really another product out there at the time. Maybe Google Tour Creator, but Google deprecated that. So I found the ability to layer on information really interesting. And I thought that that was something that we could really, really use to elevate young people's voices. And I saw a sketch note that I think it was like it's called, like, the English version is Ofsted, but in Scotland it was HMIE. And they were producing these sketch notes of inspections. And then they thought they were so cool because they were doing sketch notes of an inspection report. And I was just looking at it, seeing this massive jumble of kind of concepts. And I was like, how do you kind of make sense of that? And where are the young people's voices? I want to hear what children thought about it. And how is a sketch note accessible? I mean, you can't use immersive reader with something like a sketch note, can you? So I thought, well, how can I take something like that and really make it accessible and enable young people to have their voices? So I took a sketch note a school had done of their school values, and we started embedding all the young people's voices in it. And of course it was accessible, and put text and videos and made it completely multimodal. And that was it for me. And I saw the reaction and how you can make something completely interactive, that I was like, yeah, this is where I want to be working.
That is brilliant, because that, as somebody somebody who's dealing with newfound diagnosis, but also I've always been that person who needed multi-modal, who could read, but also would love that to be a sound opportunity, would also like that to be active, would like that to be video. And the fact of, from a UDL perspective, from a universal design for learning perspective, for those people who aren't aware of that space, creating those multiple means and multiple modes of expression and representation and engagement. It might not be all at the same time, but it's that ability that people can access it in different ways. And we always refer back to what Paddy says. He's probably nicked it from somewhere, Paddy from Textile Everywhere, who said a lot of these tools are necessary for some but useful for all. And that's what I find really powerful. And I think that what you're trying to do and the work that is being done with ThingLink and the interactivity in the immersive space in that is about creating a opportunity to really think through how do we make, it's that phrase you used a minute ago about the engagement of learners, increased engagement of learners. I know that we were both at an event recently with Tara Jones, who's another friend of the podcast, and we were talking about, and she mentioned moving from attendance statistics to engagement, and actually measuring engagement is more important surely than measuring whether they're there or not there. So yeah, I think there's a lot in that, isn't there? That it allows for engagement rather than just attendance, and allows people to access it as they need to.
And not just that, I think the endpoint matters. And I think when you've got those kinds of resources and they can be used and accessed on a phone anytime, anywhere, they can be accessed on any device anywhere. But if you're thinking about somebody accessing a learning experience on their own or in a group, you could view that with, a screen or a projector. You could even put it into an immersive space and work together, and see each other's responses when you're looking at an immersive experience. So it's not just about how you're presenting the content, but the endpoint as well. And I really love that ability to make sure that you're thinking about everybody's experience of engaging with it as well. And there's been a lot of talk about VR, and don't get me wrong, I think VR headsets have their place, but for some people, they're just not right. As a prescription lens wearer, I find it a bit of a challenge as well. So if you've got the different endpoints all with the same resources, then people are finding their own ways to be able to access them and what's right for them as well.
Yeah, I think it goes into that whole conversation around pick and mix education, purposeful, meaningful, but also that choice right then. You called it out about learning styles, and one modality being the longevity of somebody's life. That was I don't even know why we thought that was a thing, but clearly it's been disproven. But to go through all that and actually give them the choice of how they want to access it, open it, engage in it.
Yeah.
I always take this opportunity on the Edufuturists podcast to go through and share the story of Ella. I'm not going to deep dive into it, because if you've listened before, you've heard it every single week. But actually how that's coming to the forefront with a streaming society and learners that want them to pick and move through quickly. So ultimately, and also, I remember, I'm just going off tangent a little bit, but I remember, I think it was 2015 maybe, we did a process when I was in sports still, and we did a year where we did no written feedback whatsoever. So we did a full year. It was BTEC, and we made the decision to use Screencastify. And we said, what we're going to do is we're going to create video for every single thing. And because when we'd engage with learners and stakeholders, it turned out that actually the device of choice for a lot of our learners, especially when looking at the feedback, they were only looking at the grade because they were looking at they were accessing on the bus or their transport or walking to the college, and they were using a mobile phone. So to try and engage reading it is really difficult and look through all of the writing. So we did that so they could listen to it and everything else. And I think it just gives it that, that if people want to read through it and engage, absolutely fine. But if people want to immerse themselves in different ways, they can do so. And I just don't think we engage enough with that learner thing that you talked about in terms of that sketch. We just don't engage enough with what learners actually want. We just make a presumption as adults of it's exactly what it should look like and feel like, and we know more about them than they know because they're young'uns, and how would they know? And maybe just ask them.
Absolutely. And I think a really good example of that is, I love Notebook LM. Everyone's thinking about Notebook LM. That little podcast is great. And I made a 5-minute podcast the other day, just a very quick one. And I've embedded the podcast into a tag. And then I've also made a video with the podcast and put the subtitles on it as well, which is in the tag. And then I've got that all embedded within the kind of course. And, if you are going to make an assumption that everybody is going to really benefit from a Notebook LM podcast, make sure it's got subtitles. And you can do that with Canva. You can't download the text file from Notebook LM as yet. But if you put the podcast as an audio file into Canva, you can really easily create subtitles, which are going to be like dark background. You can even change the text colors. And people are used to kind of TikTok style videos as well. So, there's no reason why you couldn't mix and match with all those modes and create them so that they're right for your learners. If you're thinking like that as default, then you're also thinking about accessibility as well. But why wouldn't you want to think of your podcast as another form of text, another form of literacy, and just make that really easy for your learners?
And that's it, isn't it? That is it.
She's pushing us here, Ben. Maybe that's a call out for us. Maybe we need to do that.
No. I think you're right. And to be fair, I said at a presentation just yesterday that I consume all of my content with subtitles on and capture every single one. So all of my Instagram reels that I watch, if they haven't got captions on it, they get swiped. It's usually because I've said this before, usually because I'm watching that in bed when my wife's next to me asleep, so I can't have them on noise anyway. But that's the first. But then we also watch all of our Netflix and everything else with subtitles on, and we've made a conscious choice for that. Not because we have to, because it's the necessary for some, useful for all thing. But realistically, we probably need to. That's probably something that we could put into what we're doing as a podcast perspective as well.
Some hotel waiting rooms, NHS waiting rooms, all those kind of things.
There's
because
so
they don't
many
have the
things.
sound on, the amount of information that's consumed in those, but there are different target audience anyway.
I went into my doctor's surgery the other day and was appalled. I even took pictures of it, which makes me really naughty because it says don't use your phone in the waiting room. But it was just covered with, these big graphic infographics about what service you should see when, and there were bright colours. Not one of them had a QR code on so that someone could scan it and see a digital version. And you were just overwhelmed with posters with really important health messages on. And I really wanted to go back and speak to them about it, but I don't always want to be like, yeah. So instead, I took loads of pictures and put it on a webinar and shared it with like a few thousand people instead as an example. But I was like, you should just take. How easy is it? Just get the PNG or your JPEG of your poster, turn it into an infographic, put the QR code up, multi-modal, accessible information.
Do you know why they're not doing that?
Why is that?
It will be risk averse. It will be the IT element keeping the world safe that somebody will have shared in the NHS at some point, likely, or different organisations where you say, do you know how people hack? Through QR codes. And that one bit that somebody using it once will be taken into context of never use a QR code on any of our information.
It's like,
well, actually, in the NHS, if you're publishing that, how likely, and you're in a particular, it's not as if you're just walking past a sign in the middle of the street and you're just randomly scanning things. This is legitimate opportunity that people pass by because of the risks that are shared and the fear of them.
And with augmented reality, you'll just be able to hover your phone over that poster anyway soon, and you get the hotspots and the different types of information layered. Yes, lots of interesting examples there.
Can I just jump in on that one first before you move on, Steve? So, interestingly, I wonder if this is because of typicality, and I'm going into this. I'm hoping I'm not getting on a soapbox. Is that the neurotypical world that's designed is one where people read. If they can't read, then they are not typical. They are atypical. They're divergent, or whatever else it looks like. Or if they've got issues with dyslexia, or they've got issues with attention, or whatever else it looks like, they are atypical or divergent. And so we've created a world where text as a standard is it's almost like it's okay as long as you've got that. 90% of people will be able to access it. But that's a stupid statistic because I imagine it's a lot lower than that. But I wonder if the other thing is, Steve, you mentioned risk averse, but I also wonder if there's like I don't want to say this. I'm going to say it. I say it. Do I ever hold back on things? I wonder if there's a laziness as well. I think there's a laziness that makes it so that why would I need to worry about, because I can access it and the people I care about can access it. Do I really need to worry about other people and their level of access needs? And it's probably become more prevalent as I've started to and navigate my own space into this and realizing, hold on a minute, a QR code as taking that to a immersive reader option or to an audio version or to a digital version or to a different language version, it would be, but that's because I'm an arrogant Englishman. So when I go to Dubai or when I go to Saudi, I know there's going to be signs that are going to be in English. I know that's going to be the case. And yes, it's amazing that I've got Google Lens or whatever else and I can put that over and it'll auto translate. But let's say what it is. There's a lot of people that they need this, and we've just been a little bit lazy as a society, not catering to different people's needs.
And to even build on that, I think it shows that, not just you don't care, it's just the kind of, not just the arrogance, it's about there's a lack of love there and there's a lack of thought and a lack of compassion. And that's what I think a health service should be showing, is that they're putting some love and thought into how they communicate with their customers effectively.
Yeah. So we're seeing bad examples, but there's also some great examples.
Yeah.
And I know that you had a case study to kind of give us, and I think it's from, is it Mitsubishi?
Yeah, I think it's
for an
just
export.
lovely. Mitsubishi Electric UK, that's who we've been working with. But I don't know if you saw The Apprentice. I don't usually watch it. Sometimes I watch it and I just get wound up, but sometimes I watch it and I get taken in by it. And the last season, the winner of the whole thing, he was actually developing his own business, which was installations of air cooling systems. And that wasn't just cooling systems, it was heating systems. And at the end, when they do their pitch to the industry experts and they get chosen, and this guy, he's a bit all white, he's a bit of a geezer, and he stands up and the industry says, there's a real lack of engineers. How are you going to recruit engineers for your business in the future? And he said, oh, well, I'll offer some apprenticeships. And I was just like, I want to answer that question. I've got the answer. Anyway, so Mitsubishi Electric UK build cooling systems. There's a whole kind of heating and air cooling kind of product line that they've got. And they realised they had a really big problem that they couldn't train the engineers to install them. These are engineers not who work for Mitsubishi Electric themselves, but they work out in the field for all the kind of what Americans would call mum and pop shops and little industries, and they buy these heater systems in, and then they have to train the engineers to install them. There's only 2 venues in the whole of the UK where they would learn how to fit them. So what Mitsubishi Electric UK team did is they built some immersive and interactive experiences, think 360 visuals, really engaging, really accessible, and they saved thousands on the fact that people had to travel into those centres to learn how to do it. They couldn't take people on site to show them the pros and cons of where to install them. So they built all of these immersive resources and they said, hang on a second, we don't just have an obligation to the people that are actually engineers now. We have an obligation to help the future engineers in the UK. And they started working with colleges and shared the resources with them to show future engineers what it was going to be like to work in that industry. So not only have they shared it with the people that they needed to, they shared it with everyone to inspire the next generation of engineers. And you can access those resources on a phone, on a headset, in a classroom, on a big panel. And they're specifically designed with what was missing from that last example with the NHS. They specifically designed these resources with love, care, thought about inclusive principles, about accessibility. They made them really engaging and they've had a phenomenal amount of feedback. And that's the case study. It's a really nice way in which industries can work together to help build the future of engineers, but really show how you can do it properly and successfully for a small amount of budget as well, So that's why I love Mitsubishi Electric UK. And I've got a webinar with them next week where we're going to be going into it in more detail. But yeah, it was just about showing that love and care and compassion and thought and making sure that it was right, and having, a real interest in kind of contributing to the world of the workforce of the future.
Yeah, and I think it's that crossover. It's a great example of actually, there's, I'm sure, with lots of technology, especially in education, and I think this is the thing where people say, well, what's the impact in education? We've got the impact of education in terms of those spaces, but actually that it's being used positively, not in NHS, not in the big corporates and the big industry that make the decisions and influence government change because they're so big, but actually the organisations like Mitsubishi Electric, but also all of those people as subcontractors or employed that work with them as well, that actually that this tech is immersing and impacting potentially the 1 and 2 people, the SMEs, the small businesses across the UK. Because I think that, I don't know what the statistic are, but it's high 80s, if not higher, of all business owners and businesses in the UK are actually small to medium-sized businesses anyway. So yes, we can
Absolutely.
include all the big ones, but actually some good examples from the fact that there could be an electrician or some industry, that I know, some friends are working at. There's so many different crossovers, isn't there, which really, really work.
Yeah, and the Institute of Refrigeration did some research around the accessibility requirements of engineers, and they found that there's a higher degree of future engineers coming through with dyslexia and other neurodivergent requirements. So, the fact that there is an increasing need and additional attention has been paid to the fact that they needed to make all of their materials inclusive and accessible. I think that's why it just really stood out for me.
Yeah,
And they're
and
great guys as well.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. So the fact that they've acknowledged that there is a need for an inclusive learning technologies and environments that isn't just about meeting a skill shortage, but also is the right thing to do. And they've acknowledged that there's a neurodivergent piece in that space, so need for inclusivity. But also they've hit multiple birds with one stone, haven't they? So they've created one immersive piece that can be used as a recruitment piece, as a training piece, and that's where we're thinking smart here. And I wonder whether this ties then into that broader conversation for educators who might be creating content and learning designers, technologists that are listening to this podcast that are thinking about, okay, well, this sounds all great, but it feels like there's a lot of work and effort and time, and if I'm going to think about multi-modes, I've struggled just getting one mode done. Never mind multimodal. What do you say to that in terms of like the future for digital learning and how that ties into the employability piece?
So I think that there's, when we look at kind of digital learning and employability, I think we're seeing two spheres emerging, which is digital learning, which kind of falls in the productivity sphere. So that might be, kind of learning to collaborate. Google Docs was about learning to collaborate, wasn't it? Microsoft Word was about word processing. Google Docs was collaboration. Then we've got, using different tools really effectively. And then I also think there's a lot of tools for creativity as well, which is fantastic. And we're seeing lots of AI driven tools, creating different 2D images, 360 images, all of those kinds of things with text prompts. What I'm seeing a real lack of is the kind of skills based stuff. And I think that's where, if we're really thinking truly about employability, then we've got to get serious about student creation using both those productivity and the creativity suites so that they can build things which are actually driven by learning skills. And I think that that's where, you can see examples where students are recreating their own virtual tours from a school trip. So instead of going on a school trip, coming home and writing it out on a piece of paper or typing it up on a doc, what they did, let them go out with cameras and take pictures in 360 and then bring it all back and work with different media and stitch it all together and think about accessibility, how they share it with parents and carers. There's so much in there. But if you're thinking about, I've been a massive fan of kind of interactive resumes and multimedia journals, CVs and things like that for a long time. But I'm also seeing that there's going to be a really big need for skills-based resources. And if you think about creating scenario-based learning simulations. Imagine a group of students creating a simulation about what to do when the coffee machine breaks down and you've got angry customers to deal with. What do you do? These kinds of things. You've got the tools that are out there. I'm always a big fan of having a really nice tech stack. What's in my toolbox? Well, I've got, a number of things that I know and love on a daily basis, but knit them all together and you can start producing some really nice skills-based resources.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to my notes. But yeah, I think so. And I think that takes us on to, off air, was it last week we were having a chat, Louise, about the courses that you were developing and some of the other stuff, and that link, that imagine working in a coffee shop, that barista style kind of pathway. And I know that in the business that I'm working in outside of the Edufuturists, where we're exploring that, and whether we have a road or whether we have, I don't think I've shared this with you, whether we have a runway with a flight takeoff and all those kind of things. But yeah, maybe step into some of the stuff that you're doing with some opportunities with young people, some of their learning experience, and some examples of what you've done with barista courses and things like that, because I think it's one example that can be taken and applied to so many different ways. But just the fascination, and I think your excitement to show me pretty quickly showed how positive this experience will be, because you were like, can I just show you this? And I was like, absolutely. If you're excited about it, I want to see it. So yeah, let's talk through that.
It's really cool. So that obviously my background's about community and youth work and education and looking at different ways to create really powerful learning experiences. And ages ago, I created this barista course as an example of scenario-based learning. And that being that you have to experience a challenge and then choose the choices, a bit pick your own adventure path style, Goosebumps if you're old enough to remember that, those kinds of things. And I came up with an idea of creating a barista course. And then with my 2 days, my passion project days, if you like, I've been really lucky enough to work with Ben. We went down to a project which is for young people who have become disengaged from education, and they're looking at alternative kind of curricula to engage them again. And the barista course came up as an example. And you become a barista, you can get a job anywhere in the world. And I love coffee. I drink a bucket of it every morning. So I thought, wouldn't it be great to create a course for a young person which is immersing themselves in becoming a barista, not to learn the ins and outs of everything, because you can't do that online or digitally. You need to be in front of a really fancy espresso machine to know how to use the portafilters and stuff. But this is different. The whole point of it is that if a young person has shown an interest in becoming a barista, you take that hook and you develop something which is in their context, their interest. And it isn't just about becoming a barista, it's about developing a thirst for learning. And if they haven't been engaging with learning for a very long time, the fact that you build something where every single clickable element, every bit of text is designed to make them feel comfortable, designed to make them feel good about themselves, designed to think that, yeah, this is something I can do. I bet your bottom dollar that once they start doing something like that, they'll start looking online and social media about barista, and their whole algorithms will change. And instead of being bombarded with mind-numbingly how many things you can eat or drink and nearly kill yourself, you might get things about different pours and serves and matches. And there's a whole massive industry around becoming a barista. So I developed a 2-module course, and the first module is completely multimodal. It's got a podcast which has got subtitles about the history of where the beans came from. My very first thing is like a personality quiz. What type of coffee are you? Which I developed with Canva Code. And it's the kind of thing you see online all the time. It's like, oh yeah, I'm an espresso, or are you a latte? But the whole point is that in gamification, you don't start off with a massive quiz. You start off with a little kind of challenge to make people feel good about themselves. The whole course is self-paced. It shows a journey, what kind of route they're going to be taking. And if I can just share my screen like super, super quickly, and I should be able to go into it. So here's part of the course. So we've got an interactive, what you're going to do. So all of this is accessible. You come into your welcome to your barista journey, and this is a visual overview of what you're going to be doing. It's not just about coffee to learn along the way. You get a feel for different actions, and you're going to have a go. Module 2's about a real life scenario, which you work through, what would you do in this situation? And then at the end, you finish. Excited. You're going to be keeping curious. How was it? How did you feel? So this is the journey they know they're going to be taking. And then when you go through the individual sections, everything is designed about them having a good learning experience. How did you feel about starting this barista journey? This is pause and ponder. Record your answers your way. Have you thought about what's in your drink? Imagine designing your dream cafe drink. And this is just for you, but the whole point, when you get down to pause and ponder on this one, it's like, how did you feel about listening to that podcast? Are there any other coffee related podcasts you might like? Have you seen your feed changing in your algorithms? I bet you're now being flooded with drinks, gear, latte art, the works. So the whole thing is designed to be fun, engaging, feel good, know some lingo about becoming a barista, and then maybe pairing this with a barista company or a local coffee shop to this particular school that could offer maybe 1 or 2 hours a week for this young person. So yeah, the whole thing is designed purely to be really fun and engaging. And as a result, I am now Barista Louise, and I've got a really nice espresso machine in my house. You're all welcome to come to Cafe Cardell at some point. But I joke, but the whole thing about this is that it's really, really nice. And it does go into pathways. It's got a wrap up, a day in the life of Gear to Greatness. And it's designed to be kind of quite high energy. I know it sounds a bit naff, doesn't it? Well, I've put a few emojis in, but do you know what it's about? Giving it a bit of energy. So that's the course. And, I've tried to use really popular tools. Here's the Notebook LM I created. I actually, designed something with ChatGPT, created a Google Doc from it, downloaded it as a PDF or put it in Notebook LM. And I put a GIF in there. That's just a bit of energy again. And then, and that's my podcast with subtitles. So this is what I've been doing. And I think that there is going to be a need for a whole world of courses like this, because if you do have a look at the online course world, which I'm heavily immersed in, young people are expected to go and complete a Coursera course or something, which is not geared to their expectations or skill level or vocabulary. But that is, and I think if we're really truly honest about hybrid and flexible learning at the moment, and I know Matt at Crossway talks about this extensively on his LinkedIn, we've got to get industries to work with us to create these kinds of courses or experiences which are, not just about skills, they're also about metacognition. Those pause and ponder points were metacognition. So every single element of this course is being built with love, and I love it. I love it. And it's making me feel really passionate and taking me back to my roots, which is really about creating the best experiences for young people that we can possibly create.
And you can see that passion and that fervour in there, but also you're not just I'm really excited about something, but you've built something that actually is now iteration 1 or 2 of what it could look like if we work in partnership, if employers work together. In fact, I remember when I was back at the last college 7 years ago, we were talking about by industry, with industry, for industry, that all of our courses should be linked to how do we make this employer ready. And it's not just about employment, as we well know, but it is about making sure that young people have got a future and they've got something that they can become lifelong learners. And interestingly, I'm a bit of a coffee nerd, probably not as much of one as others, but I'm thinking to myself, well, I'd like to learn how to make a coffee a little bit better than I do now, and what are the things that I could do. And it gets to a point where even an old person like me could be keen to draw into that space of learning and what the next skills look like. And I think that's part of what we're talking about and what we're trying to, I suppose, champion in the trends booklet that's going to come out at the Uprising event. One of the things that we talk about is this lifelong learning, this making it so that it's not just when you're at school and you're at college and then your learning stops, because it doesn't work like that. And in a world that's changing as fast as it is, we're going to have to, it's that Alvin Toffler quote, isn't it? It's this idea of like unlearn, learn, unlearn, relearn, and continually be that will make us literate. The literate of the future are those people who can learn, unlearn, and relearn. That goes into that. And I think that really ties into something. I know you're passionate about lots of things, but I heard you when we were in Chester together talking about something that I know our listeners will absolutely love, and that's the concept that you talked about in terms of failure-based learning. And I wonder if you could, because a lot of this is about failure-based learning. You get it wrong, you learn from it. But I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about your concepts in that space, because I think that'll really resonate.
Yeah, I mean, failure-based learning as a concept, I think, has been around just like scenario-based learning has. I absolutely believe that scenario-based learning, and actually when students create scenario-based learning, can be really, really powerful for like a whole host of reasons. It's a real context, and you can make it contextually and culturally relevant for, you know, your purpose as well. And the whole point is that it's okay to fail, and to not be frightened to fail. And do you know what? If you do fail, you might be able to kind of reclaim it. We're all going to fail at some point in our lives, but the point is having the bounce back ability. Show my age there with Soccer AM, aren't I? Was it Stuart Pearce that said that? I can't remember. But, you know, so the idea is that if you are creating a scenario-based learning situation, you want to start with your context, and then you have a challenge or a problem. What do you do if this happens? The coffee machine breaks down and you've got angry customers, for a very kind of glib example. But it might be more serious. It might be, what do you do if you come across, you know, an accident, or someone has a heart attack in front of you, those kinds of things. It's used a lot in healthcare. You know, what do you do if, you know, something really hits the fan? But the point is that in a safe environment, over and over again, it's not about particularly assessment and scores. And that's why I struggle with, you know, kind of games-based learning when you're trying to hit a certain mark, because actually it's okay to see if you took that door, what was behind it. You know, you haven't lost, you've actually just learnt that you don't go down that route. So the idea is that you'll have a number of challenges, you'll have a number of choices for those challenges, and then you can see the consequences of those choices, which is the essence of scenario-based learning. And then, of course, at the end, you have contemplation or reflection, feed forward or feedback. Now, with failure-based learning, it's that, but it's also where you built in channels to reclaim the situation. So you might get to the end and think, that's it, you know, I've really blown it now. All the customers have gone online and said my coffee shop shut because I told them that the espresso machine was broken. But actually, how do you handle that? Do you actually say... And in the one that we created, and actually went into a cafe and filmed it with a young person. And it got to the point where the angry customer was saying, I wanted my bucket of coffee. I can't go to work without my bucket of coffee. I'm going to go all on social media and I'm going to shout about you and bring your cafe down. And actually, you know, the response there is to be overwhelmingly, you know, what can I do to make the situation better for you? I'm really happy to offer you an alternative drink. I'm happy to offer you a little bit of discount to compensate for your time, but I really appreciate your patience in the situation. And it just flipped the whole script. And that's the point. You know, you can try these things in a safe environment. It's okay to fail. We learn through failures. We learn through near misses. And actually, there's something that someone said to me like years ago, that, you know, the nuclear industry learn more from near misses than they do them when, you know, something goes catastrophically wrong and it's existential. So if we can just learn from those near misses, from the times we fail, and we reward ourselves for how we come back, how we bounce back, how we reclaim that situation. Because I think that's a really powerful way to enable our young people to develop skills, confidence in a safe environment. We're thinking about their mental health and well-being in all of this process because you've got guardrails and supports. And if we can build that in a way like the Barista course, which is fun, engaging, it's designed to hook you, to make you feel good about learning, develop a thirst for it in whatever medium you want. If it's Diary of a CEO podcast, if it's, watching a documentary, it's finding that modality in a safe way. And I think failure-based learning is so much more contextually relevant at the moment. There you go. Soapbox over. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can't remember who it was that we had on the podcast, and they talked about the fact that a lot of times when the learners get to university in the first year, they are shocked and upset by when they get 60%, I think it was, or into those bits, the bit that gets them basically a first or a 2-1, because they're so driven to see that as a failure percentage. They don't understand the difference. And ultimately what we do is we create the heightened stress based on endpoint assessments in the UK and further afield by the exams that we give. I still talk about AstroTeller and the Moonshot Factory and all that kind of thing in terms of that, just celebrating failure and spinning it on its head and giving reward based on finding failure within some potential things and identifying what can and can't be done, like Project Loon and vertical farming and self-driving cars, and all those kind of things came from celebrating failure and praising failure to actually find the right way to do something. Like, I think, is it Edison and light bulb and all those, we've seen all of those quotes over and over again where ultimately they've tried and tried and tried and they've learned something new. The post-it note example, all of these things came from actually trying something, finding something they could, finding a different solution to the one that they needed. But by just playing it safe and just getting to that point, I think we narrow mind our young people and everybody into just thinking that there was only one right way to do something and ultimately shy away from failure.
I'm a really big fan of Eckhart Tolle as well and the power of now. And, there's just absolutely nothing to come from sitting worrying about the past and letting it beat you up. You've got to try and think now, what do I do about making today the best I can make it, not worrying about the future. And, there's a little bit of that in there as well. It's like, how can we deal with that appropriately and not be devastated if, like you say, you got 60%.
Yeah. So every time at the back end of our podcast, we do 3 quick fire questions.
Ooh.
Louise, I don't know why you're surprised. You watched and listened to every episode. I don't know why people pretend they're shocked, and we just think we've got more listeners than we have, and the stats are lying to us. But I'll start. Ben will come in, and then I'll finish. So the first one is, what's one outdated educational practice that you think that we need to abandon?
I'm trying to think on my feet and think. I think it has got to be crossword puzzles and word searches.
Perfect. In terms of measuring success, how can we measure learning success beyond grades, do you think?
I think that we could learn a lot from industry, how they measure ROI, and be a bit smarter about that, and also take into account how young people's experiences were evaluated as well, and look at it in a longitudinal way and not just, right, they're out the door, forget about them, don't come back. Make sure the kids are doing all right later on in life too.
Love it. What is one thing that you want our listeners to remember?
That failure-based learning is a really nice way to look at skills, and scenario-based learning, those two together, multi-modality, accessibility with everything they're doing. If you're producing a sketch note for people, try and think about accessibility. If you're using a podcast, think about having subtitles for it as well, or closed captions.
Love it. Love it. These are great thoughts. And as always, Louise, we know that conversations with you will always be rich, full of different avenues and squiggles that we can go down, but centered on that. How do we make this better for learners? What can we do to make this more fair, more equitable, more accessible? I think that's a thread that's run through your whole career, and also every conversation we ever have with you, that's where the passion comes, when you can do that. So we're grateful for what you do. You were one of our earliest Edufuturists of the Year winners, and continue to keep pushing the envelope, pushing the needle for the future of education. So thank you so much again for joining us. We appreciate you, and we appreciate what you're doing as well. So keep up that wonderful work.
Thanks, both of you. I really appreciate both of you too.
Thank you, Louise.
Shaping